Around that same time, I was holding our new granddaughter, who was just under a year old, Charlotte. And I remember thinking, if I want to be around for her high school graduation, that means I'm going to be 80 years old, so I need to take better care of myself.
This is the executive body. He'd already done what most people think is enough. He'd spent years in the gym, he'd played college football. He is the COO of a 50-person company leading multiple locations and juggling a demanding career and staying busy every single day. But at 62 years old, his blood pressure was climbing. His cholesterol was getting worse. He'd already had 2 knee replacements and 4 back surgeries. Then he held his granddaughter for the first time, and one thought hit him. If I want to be here for her high school graduation, something has to change. Fast forward 12 months, he's completely off his blood pressure medication, he's off his statins, his resting heart rate has dropped from 70 to 52. He hasn't missed a workout. But what fascinates me the most isn't the physical transformation. It's how he changed the way he thinks. Because Chris didn't just lose weight. He became the kind of man who no longer negotiates with himself. This is the story of Chris Hembrough. It's been a year since you started the program, and pretty much about 8 months since we recorded part 1 of this podcast, which is pretty cool because this is essentially part 2. I'd like to understand what's the biggest difference between those 2 versions of you prior to starting the program and now, year on, and almost getting to an end of this whole journey.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference for me is that we have been very disciplined, and I say we because, my wife's been very supportive throughout this process, and we've really, in some ways, done this together. We both went to the gym prior to starting the program, so I think maybe that certainly was advantageous for me because I kind of knew my way around the gym and enjoyed working out, but I had never paid really any attention to calories and macros. That was a big shift for me. It was there was a bit of a learning curve, but for us, the ability to learn that and then count calories and macros and meal prep has been a significant change for us health-wise, lifestyle-wise, and our ability to better understand what gets results. I'm not sure I ever understood fully that it's just as much or more about what I'm putting into my body than the outputs or than the work in the gym. So I think that's a significant shift for me. And then I think, my coach, Chris, has been terrific with helping me better understand some of the ups and downs when it comes, body weight's the one sign I can see, when I weigh in every day. And I think he has helped me better understand why that number moves, even though it's going down overall, why it occasionally jumps a little bit here or there based on levels of stress, whether I've rested well that week, whether digestion has been good or bad, and the kinds of things that really do impact that from day to day that I never even thought about before.
Yeah. Interesting. You recently had kind of like 8 days of travel a few weeks back, right? Family wedding, there was a business trip, sort of back to back.
Correct.
What was going through your head before you left? Because I know it was quite a sort of pivotal moment. It was, first time going away for so long. And I do remember you were a little bit sort of uncertain how it's all gonna play out.
Yeah, during this last year, I've had a number of, 2 or 3 day trips, business related, or maybe my wife and I quick getaway or something like that, but never something so long. You were exactly right. It was a family wedding. And then right on the heels of that was a business trip. So gone for 8 or 9 days. So my concern going in was, at home, it's easy. I can control my environment. we can control what we prepare on the weekends for the next week, food wise. I can have far greater control over my schedule. So I knew those two factors, the food factor and the, we looked ahead and saw that we had, there were gyms in the two places we were going to be. So I was like, well, we'll make the workouts happen. That won't be difficult. But the food was a bit of a concern. And I watched something that you posted online, to be quite honest with you, really maybe just a few weeks before that travel happened. And I remember you saying, so when you travel, control the controllables, such as get a lot of protein early in the day, every day. Start your day with a lot of protein, which we do now. I mean, I eat the same breakfast every single day. That may sound boring to some, but I don't even have to think about it now. And so to me, that's not boring. That's just that's an easy box to check. So, so we made sure to do that. And we made sure that our stay allowed us that. We did an Airbnb so we could go to the grocery store and get the things that we needed. And so we just loaded up on I think most mornings I'd get 65 to 70 grams of protein to start the day, knowing that later in the day with some of the activities, I might not be able to control that as well. But we've learned enough over the last year. I have learned enough over the last year to know that in just about any setting, I can eyeball what food's available, look at it and say, okay, there's some grilled chicken here. There's some salad here. There's some seafood here. I'm going to stay away from X, Y, and Z, but those are the items I'm going to focus on when I do eat, and just be careful not to overeat. And the other biggie that you mentioned was, that our steps are our superpower, I think is the way you put it. And so we made sure that every single day we got in, not just our minimum, but hit the minimum number of steps and exceeded that, and made sure we rested well. And I think after 8 days of travel, I came home and I may have been 1 pound heavier than when I left. And within a day or two of being home, I was probably 1 pound or 2 less than I was when we left. So, and again, you guys have taught me that it's not all about the weight, but that is the indicator I can see on the scale when I get on it every morning. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite frankly, I think no matter how experienced of a trainee, dieter, whatever you want to call it, you are, I think you will always kind of almost obsess about that number on the scales, because, when it comes to weight loss, fat loss, that is the one sort of metric that you always see and kind of gives you the indication whether there is progress or not. Yes, you are aware of all the other things that are happening behind the scenes. And as coaches, we are here to obviously remind you of all of that. But I think you're right. Yes, everybody tends to really focus on those numbers. But to your point, I think you've done great going away for 8 days and coming back pretty much the same weight that you left, meaning that the systems and everything that you've learned, the experience and the knowledge you've applied pretty well without having to stress about all these things. And like you said, having that structure really helped. So yeah, kudos to you. Very good.
Yeah, I would say I was a little apprehensive before that, because it was a longer period of travel than I've had since we started. But it sure was a confidence booster that, okay, we focused on the things that you encouraged me to focus on, and the outcomes, speak for themselves, I think. So.
Absolutely. Chris, for anyone who hasn't sort of heard part 1 of this podcast, which was October last year, I believe, without going sort of too deep into it, where were you physically and mentally when we first spoke?
Yes. So we spoke the 1st of June of 2025. I had my 62nd birthday in May. I had my annual physical. Around that same time, I was holding our new granddaughter, who was just under a year old, Charlotte. And I remember thinking, if I want to be around for her high school graduation, that means I'm going to be 80 years old, so I need to take better care of myself. And then I looked at my physical, and to be quite honest, some of my numbers were high, cholesterol, a few things. I was taking some medications, and I thought, boy, if there's anything I can do about this. And I've been thinking about this for some time. I just knew, we talked before, I played football through college, and so always been a bigger guy, but I carried, 245 pounds a lot differently 40 years ago. And I didn't necessarily like what I saw in the mirror. Uh,
Hmm.
and uh, and yet, I mean, there were oftentimes folks would be like, boy, you take really good care of yourself. And I thought I was until I saw some of my numbers for that annual physical, and I just didn't like as heavy as I was looking. And I said, there's no need to carry this kind of weight around, and I'm sure that's impacting my numbers. And really what I'm eating and drinking is impacting those numbers as well. So I was in I think I was in a good place to make a decision to say I need to make some changes that will hopefully benefit, me, but really benefit the people around me that are closest to me, that I want to have quality years with moving forward.
Yeah. I remember on our last call, on our last coaching call, you mentioned to me that it's become who you are rather than just something that you're doing. When did that shift sort of happen to you? What was the moment, or did you just notice it like one day throughout this process? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yeah, I'm kind of a commitment junkie. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it 100%. So there were days I didn't want to do some things. I think I mentioned to you before, but on those days, I always hear my dad's voice in the back of my head, I grew up with three brothers who used to always say to us, boys, when you don't want to do it is when you need to do it the most.
Mm.
And between my commitment and knowing that that's the truth, I did that, and it became a part of my routine. Um, I'm going to say probably about the time we did our call in October, right around Thanksgiving, the Christmas holidays. Around that time, I remember thinking, wow, this is not just something I'm doing. This is who I am now.
Mm.
And that really related more to the food stuff, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, to what I'm consuming and putting in my body, um, than the workout side, because I was doing that. Although there were a lot of days prior to the program where if I'd had a long, challenging day at work and I had every intention of going to the gym in the evening, I'd say, I'll skip it today. Well, when I look back over a month or 2 months, I'd be like, wow, I skipped a lot of days. And when I
Mm.
said yes to doing this, my first commitment was never to quit, never to skip, no matter how busy the day may be or whatever else was on my plate. It was just a commitment I made, and so I was going to fulfill it. So I'm going to say 6 months in, it was like I kind of thought, man, my brain's a bit rewired now. This is not what I do. It's become who I am. And a lot of that's
Yeah.
some of the educational things that went on in the coaching, between Chris and yourself, about understanding why certain things were happening inside my body, as well as the number I see on the scale, the measurements we would take, and then, kind of what you see in the mirror. And then
Mm.
um, I think what solidified it was when I then had my annual physical this year and saw what I
Yeah.
feel like are substantial, like massive changes in my blood work, for the good. So
Absolutely. Yeah, because you came in as someone who'd been in the gym for years, right? Even like overdoing it at times, from what I remember. Obviously, the athletic background, all of that. Was there anything in the program that sort of genuinely surprised you? Something you resisted or didn't expect to work?
um, no, no. I knew it would work if I did it. I think I mentioned to you that you crossed my LinkedIn feed a month or 6 or 8 weeks before we first connected. And
Hmm.
so I followed some of the other stories of folks you had worked with, and a number of your posts, all of which had, rang true to me as I read them. And I was like, well, I know this is going to work. It's just a matter of whether I'm willing to put in the work. yeah, I didn't have any question about whether it would work or not. I saw enough evidence in the folks you worked with, and I knew enough from my past that if you do things the right way, it's going to have good results.
Yeah, your mindset definitely was there. And to your point, I think, when we had the call, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. And yeah, I remember you said, give me 24 hours and I'll get back to you. And I think you stuck to your word, and you reached out and you were in. But I remember you told me that you never saw, if I remember correctly, you never saw the point in walking, that it didn't feel like it was doing anything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Tell me what changed?
yes. Yeah, that is yeah, very true. The one thing I resisted, which is crazy, right? Because I think you would say, I think I've read this from you and some of your online information, that walking is low hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
The steps, and I guess, and maybe it's my background. So I've always associated in my brain that I need to huff and puff and sweat, and it's got to be a hard workout for it to produce results.
Mm.
And so, genuinely, a part of me felt like, that's not gonna. I'm not. There's not gonna be any benefit from that. So why am I gonna make myself do 10,000 steps a day? And yet you guys kept encouraging it. I remember one time asking Chris, I was like, "Can I just have like Saturday was my day off at the gym. And I was like, can I just take that day off from walking as well?" And it was boring for me, to be quite honest with you. And he said, well, you can, but you're not going to see the results. And then at one point, I remember, so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I found myself many times up walking in the winter when it was really, really cold outside, walking laps around the inside of our kitchen, living room, and family room to get my last few steps in, at 11:30 at night if I hadn't gotten there. And but I he told me at one point when I was a bit frustrated, we were trying to peel off those last few pounds to kind of hit a goal that we had ultimately ended up setting. And he said, well, if you want to bump your steps up to 11 or 12,000 along with what you're doing, you'll probably get there quicker. And I said, okay. So I was, again, over time, I was convinced. And so it wasn't about the difficulty of doing it. It was just a shift in my mindset of, this really is good for me. And, I think we've talked before. I've got both of my knees have been replaced probably 8 or 9, 10 years ago, something like that. And, so maybe because before I had that done, they were so, uh, it was challenging. They hurt enough. And they still, if you talk to anybody who has artificial knees, they probably would tell you, I can still see a difference. I can still tell they're not my real knees. And so maybe that contributed to it a little bit as well. But yeah, I think it just took time to convince me that was a added benefit to what we were doing. And so now it's become part of the lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And I want to touch back on those travel days, because it was 8 days of travel. There was a wedding, a work conference, sort of back to back, and you came back up barely a pound, as you said. What were you actually doing differently compared to how you'd have handled that trip, let's say a year or a year and a half ago?
Yeah, I think a number of things. I would have just said, well, I'm not going to the gym. I
Mm.
got to go find a gym. It would have been one of those times where I just skipped. So there would have been 8 days of no activity. I certainly wouldn't, as far as gym work, whether it was strength training or cardio sessions. So that wouldn't have happened in the past. I would have just taken that time off. I also wouldn't have been intentional about getting in my 10 to 12,000 steps a day. And I would have paid no attention to my food intake. Instead, I would have probably overeaten, because it's like, I think I would have had a bit of the mindset of, well, it's a break, it's a vacation, it's time to kind of let my hair down and enjoy this time with family and friends and this work trip. And I'm sure I would have had consumed more red wine as well. I think I told you early on that's kind of my. I enjoy a glass of red wine, and before I started the program, I enjoyed more than a glass of red wine most days. And so on a trip like that, those are probably the biggest things. I paid close attention to what I was eating, what I was
Mhm.
drinking, was intentional about walking, and intentional about going to the gym.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Because the reason I asked this question, because there are probably a lot of people who are listening to it that are in that sort of boat of a lot of business travel, a lot of just travel in general. And I hear it all the time. Time is the obstacle, travel, business, all of that stuff. But really, it doesn't have to be that difficult or complicated. It's very much, again, having that structure, having that system, and then just following through, right?
Yeah, I think exactly. I think the structure. I'm a pre-planner, so for just whether for work, I always look at the week in advance. The weekend before and what that week's going to look like and what has to get done and so on and so forth. My appointments, just making sure the calendar's in good shape. And so again, I would have never pre-planned workouts. Well, before we ever traveled, I was online looking to see where the closest gym was, and we looked
Hmm.
at the schedule of events for our 8 days of travel and said, here's the day, here's how many workouts need to get done, and here's the days when we know we're going to have windows of time to do that. And that's another time where I think it became where in my head it confirmed for me this is not something I do. This is who I am, because it was never a question. It was just,
Hmm.
hey, this is I'm gonna not I this has got to get done like it's drudgery. It was just like this is what I do. This is who I am, and partly kind of enjoyed the challenge, to be quite honest with you, of saying, okay, how do we get these things done and continue with what we're doing, even though we're not in our normal setting and circumstances.
Yeah. I fully agree. I think, you nailed it there. It comes down to planning and preparation. And if you
Yeah.
can do that, then you can overcome pretty much anything. And again, we as a team, we're here, keep you accountable, help you with all those situations, travel and things like that. So yeah, it truly comes down to just committing to making it work. I wanted to touch on something, Chris, because I'm referring to our latest sort of coaching call recently, our conversation that we had. And there was a moment at a business dinner, I believe, where someone pushed you to skip the gym and stay for drinks. Um, Remember, you told me a story. Can you walk me through what happened? Because that was a really interesting moment.
Yeah, it was just I mean, hey, guys are good friends in the industry that I work in, and that we'll always enjoy a meal together or a couple drinks together, and I was like, hey, I will meet up with you guys. I need about an hour and a half. I gotta go to the gym. No, you can man, you can skip it. And I'm like, well, I really can't. And
Mhm.
I said, I'm gonna go to the gym, and let me know, text me where you're going to be, send me a message, and I'll catch up. And we did. And to me, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was
Mm.
just like, well, no, this is what I'm gonna do. So, yeah, maybe I was asked a couple of times, "Oh, why don't you skip that this time around?" And I said, "Well, I can't do that." So, I would have done that previously. That's, you asked about the difference.
Yeah.
For sure, that would have, and I think I probably wouldn't have pre-planned to go to the gym in the first place. Um,
Mm.
so
Yeah. The reason I ask this question is because it's one of those situations again where I see and hear it a lot, where guys are sort of tied into these social events, situations where really it's very much easy to make a decision. It's a bit of a peer pressure, I suppose, as well, in many cases, right? Where,
yeah,
you know, staying for drinks, one turns into a few, and then it kind of has a ripple effect on everything else. And again, the way you handled it is you really stuck to your guns. You still managed to enjoy the time with your friends, colleagues, etc., but you did what you had to do. And that comes down to that sort of new, I want to say new version of yourself almost. So yeah, that was a great moment, and it really sort of stuck with me because I was like, yeah, that's really something. something special here. So yeah, thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
for sure. I think, one of the things I've heard you say before, and again read, that I think um, is important, is that it's easy. I mean, it's human nature, so it's really easy for all of us to kind of drift. And
Mm,
I've always said we don't drift in the right direction. When we drift, we kind of go in the wrong direction. And so it's easy for one to become two and two to become three. And I'll skip today, and skipping today becomes I'm also going to skip tomorrow and the third day. So just knowing that that's human nature in general, it's something that, again, during this last year, I've kind of focused more on that, and learned to guard against it, and learn to not just pre-plan, but make decisions in advance of how I might handle a certain set of circumstances versus having to make a decision in the moment, if that makes
mm.
sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's interesting. Where does that confidence come from, Chris? Because a lot of guys I speak to struggle in exactly that moment, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, every bit of good progress solidifies things that much more, and so I know what the work has looked like to make the progress, and
Mm,
again, I know that it's kind of the slippery slope. If you start, I know me well enough. This is just who I am, that it's just easier to decide in advance what I'm going to do or what I'm not going to do. And I've heard you say before, you mentioned drinks, so I'll use that example that, it's healthy for folks to determine in advance, okay,
mhm.
hey, I'm going to this event. I'll allow myself a couple glasses of wine or whatever that may be, versus I'll just see what happens. I'll
Yeah.
see what happens usually doesn't end
Yes.
where you wanted it to end. And again, it's just, I think, for me, done a lot of work to get to a certain point and don't want to do anything to undo that. So I'm not
Yeah.
even sure it's you use the word confidence. Maybe it's a confidence thing, but it's more that than anything. It's, hey, we've done a lot to get to this point. Let's not unravel that.
Mm. No, I think it's a great point. But when I say confidence, I think it does require a bit of confidence to actually say no and stick to your guns and go, I actually have plans. This is what I've got on my agenda, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to do that. And then if I feel like I'm going to join or whatever, because again, in the moment, I think it's very easy to be swayed and then drift, as you said, right? So
Yeah.
that was to me that really stood out because you had that strength, confidence, whatever you want to call it, in that moment to say, no, I'll pass. I've got my things to do. And then if I decide to come back and rejoin, then I'll do that. So yeah, that was very interesting. Um, you've now pretty much come off your blood pressure medication entirely, right? Um, when you got those latest blood results back, what did you actually feel? Because that's quite a story there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just satisfied, and one of those moments where you say, "Hey, the work paid off. The
Mm,
changes have paid off." Like we said, now part of me was very, uh, very surprised at the change in some of those numbers from a year ago to now. To be honest with you, I didn't think those things were possible. I didn't expect to see what I saw on my blood results at my most recent physical, which were about a year apart. And yeah, completely off of everything blood pressure wise. I'm off of. I was taking. I had a handful of different meds I was taking. I would think not a lot, but I don't know what most people take or don't take, but I've been taking blood pressure medication for years, for many, many years. So I'm not
mhm,
taking any of that now, for months. I'm also not taking any statins or cholesterol medication. My cholesterol was high, And now it's, I don't know, it might be borderline low. Um, and so I'm off of that. I'm really not, I don't take anything. Um,
That's incredible.
yeah, so I didn't, to be honest, and we never talked about that being an end result. I don't recall. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, or being a goal even, but it became the next natural step as I tracked, in your program, my blood pressure daily and saw it just continue to come down and come down and come down to the point where it was so low on the blood pressure medications that it was probably at a point where it might have even been dangerously low. So that's, yeah, was very surprising.
Yeah. What do you remember what the doctor said when you saw them and they saw the
Well,
results?
it's funny. So I intentionally, usually I'll have my physical and then go get my blood work. Well, I
Yeah.
was anticipating what it might look like and somewhat in a hurry to find out. So I said, "Hey, can we do the blood work several days before my actual office visit because I wanted those results and wanted to talk through them." And I so we did the blood work and I was able to get a look at it before going. So I was excited about that visit. And when I went in, they were like, "Wow, what have you been doing for the last year?" And because I don't think I look that much different, but others will say that again because I live with myself every day. Some days I don't want to
Yeah.
live with myself, but I do. So, um, and they were just very, very, very surprised. And so I told them what I've been doing. And I really didn't, outside of friends and family, say much about the last year and what I'd been working on. People would ask me because they could see a difference, but I hadn't seen, the doctor since prior to starting the program. So I would say they were surprised and, maybe a little bit reluctant to have me come off of the medication, but at the same time, they're like, "Well, your numbers tell us that you don't need it." So, we said, my deal with them was I said, "Well, let's give it a try. How about we recheck it in 3 months after being off of the medication?" So that's the plan. So I would say they were
Yeah.
surprised.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's to me, that is pretty much the biggest success because I always say that the sort of physical part and the body recomposition, the physique, it's just a byproduct of everything that's going on behind the scenes from a health perspective, blood work, lipid panel, all of that stuff. So I'm so glad and happy to see you come off all these meds, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty
Look,
cool to see they do a look back on our charts for blood work and to see the numbers where they had been because I do a physical every year to see where they had been for the last several years. And I probably looked at them, but I just maybe ignored them because I didn't want to look at them. I don't even know that. I don't recall that, to be quite honest with you, but I was never really greatly concerned about it until last year. And they weren't substantially different last year than they were the few years previous to that. But boy, to see them on a piece or on a computer screen and then to see them on a piece of paper, to look at the graph and everything going from, way up here to all of a sudden droppings, pretty,
yeah,
pretty rapidly over time was, you see something like that on a computer screen or on paper and it's like, wow, this is substantial.
yeah, that's phenomenal. Um, I think it'll be unfair at this point not to mention your lovely wife, Janelle, who's been a huge part of this whole journey. Um, what does it look like day to day, the two of you keeping this sort of going together? Because no doubt she's been phenomenal and great support and a huge part of this whole process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one, meal prep wise is a big deal for us every weekend to get ready for the upcoming week. We this may sound crazy, but um, we use the phrase that we eat like dogs, and and what we mean by that is that I'm a dog lover. We don't have one anymore, but when we did, the dog got the same food every day, and so we have I have pretty was the same breakfast every morning, and that to me is a good start to the day. When prior to
Mhm.
the program, I hardly ate breakfast. That was a
Mhm.
huge. You asked me about differences. That's a huge shift for me. I'd grab a prepackaged protein drink and a cup of coffee on the way out the door in the morning, previously. And now that looks completely different. But then we have our 4 or 5 meals that we eat in the evening that are predetermined.
Mhm.
And I love to grill out, but I'm not very good in the kitchen. And she's been just fantastic with, we decide what we're going to do, and she'll prep that stuff, and we package it up, and it's in the fridge, and it's really easy to pull. So it's been it would have been much more challenging without her doing the program with me. And
Mhm.
benefit, a huge benefit is that we've both always enjoyed working out, and prior to the program would go to the gym um together most of the time. While once we get there, we don't do the same exact things. There's just something about knowing we're going together that is, somewhat motivational. It's, has some built-in accountability. Again, those are things we predetermine as well. We know at the start of the week when we're going to go on each
Mhm.
day, and what day is going to be a day off, and we build in a little bit of flexibility for surprises that come up, so we can move something around if we need to do it. But I mean, having somebody else that you're doing it with, I think has made it substantially easier to do the program. Where I think, I don't know this to be true, but I think there's probably some folks who maybe they have a spouse who isn't really committed to doing this, and therefore, while maybe not intentional, it almost sabotages the ability to do it, because it's like, oh, you're going to the gym again. Oh, we have to eat that again. Those kinds of things. I don't know that goes on, but I suspect it might. And so to have somebody who's doing this side by side with you is so valuable that it's hard to, put words to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point that you touched there on, because it's absolutely true that there are situations like that. That support network at home is very much almost paramount sometimes. Hence, why I always ask the question on my strategy course when I speak to men is, what does that look like? What's that support network at home? Is the partner, the wife, the spouse, whoever, are they supportive of you doing something like that? Because to your point, yes, it sometimes does happen. Now, on the other hand, that those sort of situations usually are as a result, or come up as a result of men not necessarily sharing fully their why and the reason behind the program, or them wanting to achieve certain things. Because I always say, if you truly want to change your health and your life as a result of this, if you share the why with your partner, your wife, your spouse, surely they would want the best for you, right? Because that means that if you're healthy, longevity, the benefits of it are endless. So who wouldn't be supportive? But I think it comes down to those sometimes, maybe hard conversations that men aren't necessarily ready to have. So yeah, that was a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that's certainly true. It probably in general, we men don't have those conversations maybe as often or as deeply as maybe a spouse would. Um, and I think you make a great point about the why. If people,
Mm,
if the folks close to you understand why
yeah.
you're doing something, not just this program, but in many cases,
Yes.
then it's easier, not just easier, but oftentimes very inviting for someone to get on board with you if they understand your
Absolutely.
why. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Chris, I remember you said to me that you feel more emotionally stable now, that stressful situations don't necessarily hit you the same way that they used to, that that's not something people usually associate with fitness program. What do you put that down to?
yeah. Well, I just think as disciplined as I felt like I was prior to doing this, I'm probably more disciplined today, a year later.
Hmm.
Um, And I think a lot of that pre-planning, I think when you're, this is speculation, but I think if I'll just talk about me, I think because I'm healthier,
Hmm.
I was never somebody who I didn't feel bad, to be quite honest with you, before I started this program. Wasn't somebody who lacked energy before starting the program. Um, so I didn't sense or feel like this huge shift in how I feel day to day, but I do feel like stressful circumstances don't impact me maybe in the same way as they did before. And I think that might speak to um, pre-planning, being in better condition so that those things don't impact me as much. My rest is a lot better. And
Yeah.
so I think when you're more rested, you're more, when I'm more rested, I'm better prepared for the challenges that come my way.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. I think you really nailed it there. It does come down to a lot of what you said: rest, removing that unnecessary stress off your plate, and actually controlling the controllables. I think that in itself really lowers the stress in many ways for people, which makes them more emotionally sort of resilient, in if that's even the right word here, but sort of controlling the emotions, and yeah, being a lot more sometimes, maybe patient as well, because when you're stressed, that the impatience drives the stress, and sometimes people are short, and all of that. So yeah, that's a great
Yeah, no,
point.
I think your statement about controlling the controllables might sum it up best. You control
Yeah.
all those things, and then a result of that is you rest better, you sleep better, you
Mm.
respond more appropriately, or I think. Um, doesn't mean do it perfectly for sure. In fact, I'm very far from that. Um, but the that's a really good point I hadn't thought about. If you control the things you can control has been, and I think I'm more focused on that now than previously. And I
Yeah.
can more easily say, you know what, that I can't control that. And so I'm not going to give it a bunch of my energy and a bunch of my time. If I can't control it, then, control what I can and leave the rest to the side and deal with it as it arises.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you this, Chris. If you bumped into a version of yourself from, let's say, 2 years ago, what's the one thing that would surprise that guy most? And I'm not talking about weight necessarily, not necessarily the blood pressure or anything like that, but something about how you operate now.
Hmm. I think it would be I think every bit of it would be around, my food intake, like I'm really planning and paying close attention to what I eat and what I drink.
Mm.
And I would say somebody who hears that might say, "Wow, it's really rigid and that's really difficult to follow." I would say that's absolutely not the truth. It's just it's just thought out in advance.
Yeah,
And again, now it's not even, I don't have to think about it because it's a part of who I am versus how I'm
that's
going to
it.
eat. It just happens. Like I know in advance because I'll meet clients and potential clients or customers for lunch or what
Mm.
have you many times, depending upon the week. So I know in advance, wherever I'm going to go, I'm going to get a very basic house salad without all the junk on it that makes
Mm.
a large salad just as bad as a lot of things I could eat. And I'm going to ask for a piece of grilled chicken on top of it. And I just know in advance that's what I'm going to do. And then I don't even have to look at that double cheeseburger that I really used to eat all the time and might want to eat still. And it doesn't mean I don't still do that. We've found, some great lean beef and those kinds of things that we do as well. So I think it's that. I think
Yeah,
that's what that guy would notice from a couple of years ago. Is like, wow, you're pretty focused on what you're going to eat, and you don't deter from it very easily.
yeah. It's again, great point that you're bringing up here, because clearly nutrition has been the biggest eye opener. Let's call it that way in this whole process for you. And I think it is for many people. Hence why sort of understanding nutrition, tracking is necessary for people to really understand the portion control, understand what is it actually that they are consuming, how much, how many calories, how is it broken down when it comes to macronutrients, i.e. protein, fats, carbohydrates. In order for you to understand, you have to go through the process of, yes, tracking and seeing and learning that way. And as you said, some people may look at it as maybe restrictive, maybe strict, whatever you want to call it. However, whenever people decide to do this, the goal usually is longevity, is health, is, yes, energy, physique, better physique, fat loss, all of those things. In order to achieve those things, you have to put the work in, and in some cases, sacrifice a little bit of your time or whatever it may be in order to achieve those. But isn't that the goal in the first place? To actually have a much better quality of life and being able to sustain that. And going back to what you said, yes, it does come down to planning. It does come down to planning. It comes down to planning and eating before, structuring your meals in a way that you don't have those cravings. It's the same example as going shopping on an empty stomach. You know, you'll find yourself putting a lot of things that you don't actually need or want in that moment into the trolley just because you are shopping with your eyes, you know, in a sense that, yes, when you're hungry, you just want to eat everything. So yeah, to your point, I absolutely agree. Planning and structuring and having a system in place. So yeah. I also remember you said that the best gift that you can give to your kids and your grandkids is your health. Now that you're actually living that, what does that mean in practice, Chris?
Hopefully it means, you'd have to ask them if this is true. Hopefully it means I'm more present when we are together, you know, mentally, emotionally. I think it means I'm more physically able. Again, I mentioned a minute ago, and you know, I think you said at the start of the program or our last podcast or whatever, part one, that I brought a lot of baggage with me from some of my old athletic days, and my body kind of beat up. But you guys found a way to work around those things. And I just think, again, I go back to walking. This whole thing of movement is, you know, now I'm more convinced than ever that the more I move, the better I feel. The more I move, the better condition I'm in. And so I think in practice, what that means is physically, I'm putting myself in a position where, you know, down the road, I'll hopefully be more physically able when I'm with kids, grandkids, all those kinds of things, to be engaged physically, if that makes sense, to be able to help physically with things, to be able to get on the floor, you know, and which, you know, wasn't a problem before this, but you know, had I continued on the same path, that might have been a problem in 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. And hey, I know none of us are guaranteed tomorrow, but I hope I have a lot of tomorrows left. And I think physically and practicality, I'm in a better place to be able to do those kinds of things. But I think really for me, it's being more present mentally and emotionally when with family, you know. Oh, well, not just with family, with anyone, but especially, you know, with our kids and we have one grandchild. If we're blessed with more down the road than with those future grandkids. Yeah. So,
yeah, well, that's actually a beautiful segue, because you know, you started this whole journey with a moment where you were holding your granddaughter Charlotte in your arms, right? And thinking about being there for her school graduation. That was really the catalyst for you to really transforming yourself. and you're a year in now. How
Yeah.
does that feel different from when it was just a thought?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I know I'm in a better place. I know that when I had, you're right, there were just a couple of catalysts, that my annual physical and a significant conversation that, my wife and I had about health and well-being moving forward. And I just think, not just but we're in a much better place, as a result to, to be able to give more to that, to the family experience with kids and grandkids moving forward than we were, say, 12 or 18 months ago.
That's phenomenal. Well, Chris, it's seriously, your journey's been absolutely phenomenal. What you've achieved in those 12 months and how you've taken to this whole process, I want to say in a very much professional way, is just amazing. So, from myself and on behalf of my team as well, just wanted to say thank you because it's been an excellent ride. Seriously, I think the health changes, the physique changes, the energy, all of those things is just a testament to, to you as a person, as a professional, and how, like I said, how you've taken to this whole thing. It's been phenomenal. It's been a great pleasure, being there, watching you really transform. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I mean, I've said it to you and Chris many times that it's certainly been a team effort, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today without having us having that first phone call on the 1st of June of 2025, and then all of the coaching and the tools that you guys have provided. And in case somebody takes the time to listen to this, I want one of the things I want to say that I think has been hugely beneficial for me, for us, is that this is not a diet plan. Early
Mm,
on, I probably wanted you guys or my specific coach, Chris, to like just tell me what to eat and I'll do it.
mm,
Um, and instead, you guys were, more coaching about nutrition. And like I said, I never counted calories, macros, protein, carbs, and fat grams. I'd never done that before, and I heard people talk about it, but never paid any attention to it. And so the educational process of that, where I remember him saying, "I'm not going to tell you what you should do. What I'm going to do is provide you some samples and provide you with some education around those things, so that you then can make the choices you want." Because so often, when people go on a diet, it's restrictive. They deprive themselves of the things that they like. And then when they reach a certain goal, then they stop altogether and um, probably overdo those items that they push to the side, and they end up right back where they started, or maybe even beyond to that point. And I think that is part of the genius of this, is it's about creating new systems and being educated and putting ourselves in a position that this is not a short-term window of 6 months or 12 months, but this is kind of getting out of the starting blocks for what the rest of the journey is going to look like for years and years to come. And I that's significantly different with your program than I think a lot of other programs that are out there, and there are, I'm sure, lots of good ones. But the thing about it not being a diet is,
mm.
I think, is significant. And then I got into that because you guys helped me understand that. It took me a few months to understand this is about you learning, this is about you embracing all these things and then making it fit for who you are,
Yeah.
as an individual, and that it's not a kind of a cookie cutter for everybody to do it a certain way. So it's certainly the progress and I say that the progress we've made is just that it's a we thing. It's not an I thing. It couldn't have been done without the support, and the education, and a few times a little bit of accountability. Like, yeah, you need to walk. I know you don't want to, but you need to. So, okay, I will. Uh, yeah, a we thing. And we are certainly grateful for being able to be part of the program, and uh, all the work you guys have done to support to support me through this thing. So,
well, as they say, teamwork makes dream work. So, that's what it's been. And thank you very much for the kind words. I really appreciate you, Chris. And no doubt you're a great inspiration to a lot of people. So thank you so much again.
yep. Thank you.